Welcome, I'm the Deadwood Jedi. This is another Raid Shadow Legends video, and today I am in the account of Brother Mar, Patreon of mine who wanted an account takeover, so we remade his clan boss team. Now, he was doing about 15 to 20 million on Brutal. It's a pretty early level account. There's not a ton of champions on here. Definitely not a lot of level 60 champions, so we kind of had to work with what was here, but what we did have are two phenomenal champions that are very famous for unkillable teams. Tower and Skullcrusher, and it gave me an opportunity to build a slow Tower Skullcrusher team, one that I haven't done actually in video form. So I thought this would be really good for you guys. Now, this is not one of my favorite types of comps. The reason why is it can be a little bit difficult to guide the stun, especially when you're dealing with Affinity. But I was working with it today, and I figured out some ways to kind of go around doing that. So we're able to use Tower and Skullcrusher, I believe, for every affinity. Now, I'm not able to check every single affinity, unfortunately, based off the affinity that the clan boss is, but this is a good one where we are going against a blue affinity clan boss. That's going to be strong affinity for Skullcrusher, which means he's weak affinity for the clan boss. Clan boss is going to try to avoid him. So if we can get the stun to go right, that's going to be proof purchase that this can work on various affinities. So that's going to be really, really good for us. Now, obviously, the other difficult one would be a red affinity clan boss because Tower is a blue affinity champion. And if Tower gets stunned, all bets are off. It doesn't work after that point. So being able to make sure that we're guiding the stun appropriately is important, and I was able to make it work with this. Now, this is a very popular composition. Like I said, it's been used a lot. There's a lot of variations that go into it. I would love to hear from you guys some of the ways that you have built this comp and done variations for it. So if you have any of those, go ahead and leave comments down below. That way others watching this video might get some ideas of other ways they can go about doing this. I am going to have a game on video showing different champions we can bring in if you can't replicate what I'm doing, making sure the stun goes to Skullcrusher even when he's weak or even when he's strong affinity, or when he's neutral affinity and Tower's weak affinity. I will have a link in the game on video down below showing different stun champions that you can bring in instead. So there are a few variations. You don't just have to use Skullcrusher in this. He's just by far the best option here. So with that, let's go ahead and check out the champions. Generally, I don't speed tune for anything less than Nightmare. The reason why is he was doing 15 to 20 million damage on Brutal. The top chest in Brutal's, I think, about 20 million, maybe like 22. This is a team he's running. All you have to do is basically pick 5 champions and give them War Master, and you're going to come pretty close to getting the top chest on Brutal from one key alone. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to have to go through the trouble of speed tuning your team, doing all that re-gearing, trying to maximize your speeds and damage and all that, when really all you have to do is bring in 5 master champions to be able to take Brutal down. Now, the next step, however, when you're going against Nightmare, you definitely need to start looking at speed tuning to get to that next level on it. And this account definitely needed it. I mean, you can see this is not a team that is optimized for clan boss. Sill, Gorgrab, even Stagnite, none of those are really good champions for clan boss. They're fine. They work. They can do things for you, but they're not what I would call good champions for clan boss. So we're going to build a Tower Skullcrusher team instead. And as a result, we're going to be able to have quite the crew, quite the damage out of this. I think we're going to be quite successful, and we're going to go ahead and take it in on Nightmare. Now, this is not a team that works on Brutal. It only works on Nightmare and Ultra Nightmare, but these speeds do work for both. And so we'll start, obviously, with Tower. Now, Tower I have at 248 speed. This is the speed you want. It can work a little bit slower. There are some ranges with it, so it's not like we're only have to be 248 speed. But 248 speed is the one that we're aiming for. And we got it with this. Now, you can see, not everything's rolled up. We're not maximized damage. We have no crit rate on here. That's not really what I'm concerned about. We do have War Master. That is the big thing down here. As far as the Masteries go, you can see it's pretty much just offense, defense. There's nothing fancy about the Masteries for Tower. We're also going to bring in Skullcrusher. Now, Skullcrusher needs a little bit of conversation on how you master him. There's a couple things we want to do. One, we want to make sure that we don't have Life Drinker, especially when we're bringing Doompriest in this team. We want to make sure Skullcrusher's HP is as low as possible, as soon as possible, for as long as possible. Doompriest is going to be healing Skullcrusher over time. that's going to be enough healing for us. We don't have to bring any additional healing in. And in fact, we don't want to, because in order to make the stun go to Skullcrusher, we need to make sure his HP is very, very low. Now, the couple things I'm also not taking. I'm not taking him down. I'm not giving him defense of tough skin. I'm not giving him blast proof. I'm not even giving him rejuvenation. I really want to limit the amount of healing, the amount of defense and damage mitigation he does. His job is to take the stun. So as long as he does that, I'm happy with it. We can take Resurgent. There's nothing wrong with that one way or the other. And I did come all the way down here to Selfless Defender. And this one's a nice way to help jumpstart that low HP process. He's going to take a certain amount of damage. He takes basically 20% of the damage from the first hit of all his allies. That's just going to give us that jumpstart that we want. Other than that, it's basically all the way down to War Master. Nothing super fancy as far as that goes. You can see all the way down to War Master. Nothing particularly noteworthy outside of that. As far as the kit and the gear, we have him at 174 speed, which is what he needs to have. You can see his defense is actually pretty low, only 2,800, only 28,000 HP. In this team, in this scenario, this is actually beneficial towards us. We want it just as low as possible. Now, yes, I should get his crit rate up to 100%, but I'm more concerned about getting the comp working at this point, which I've tested it. It does work, so we're going to be good on that count. Now, as far as that goes, so those two champions are necessary. The other champion that you have to have for this comp is going to be Doompriest. And Doompriest, only 5-star, not ascended at all. I don't think he's booked at all. Yeah, doesn't need it. Doesn't need any of that stuff to work. All we want to do is make sure that he's at the right speed. That's really it. So 187 speed, it works. I think it's somewhere between 186 and 188. So there is one thing that you have to be especially careful of with Roschard the Tower and Doompriest. When Roschard the Tower is at 248 speed and Doompriest is at 186 speed, when they're both fully leveled and ascended, their speeds are actually, there's points where they have the same exact turn meter. The issue is that they will tie in their turn meter speed, and so it will throw it off. So I highly recommend, if you're going to build this team, make Doompriest 187 or 188, make Roschard the Tower 247, and one or the other, right? So if you're going to have a 186 Doompriest, have a 248. Don't have a 248 Roschard, have a 247 Roschard. If you have a 248 Roschard, have a 187 Doompriest. That'll just help avoid any of those issues, which is what I did here. I have Doompriest at 187, and as you saw, Roschard the Tower's at 248. Now, I don't have any Masteries on him. He's completely unbooked. Doompriest is. She has no Ascension, not even 6 stars. It's going to work just fine. All she has to do is cleanse the debuffs. Obviously, ascending, mastering, that'll just up the damage. That's totally fine to do, but you don't have to. Now, for our 2 DPS champions, this is not a high-level account. It's not been around for a long time, so we don't have a ton of options as far as great DPS champions. Not everybody's leveled or ascended, so we're going to use who we have, and we're going to use 2 great champions for this, who I think, myself included, everybody's used at some point going through Clan Boss. Kale for our poisons, and you can see I have Kale at 176 speed. It has to be between 175 178, and just a 100% crit rate is good. Accuracy is a little bit on the low side, to be fair, but we're just doing Nightmare. We're not at the Ultra Nightmare level yet, so I'm not too concerned about that. When we want to hit that next level, definitely that's what we're going to want to improve. But you'll notice our banner, accuracy banner, is only leveled to 12. If we get a 6-star banner, level it all the way to 16. That should solve the accuracy problems on its own. We can always glyph things and replace some gear as well if we need to. As far as the Masteries go, went down the offensive tree. Here, I'll show you again. Went down the offensive tree there, all the way down to War Master. I do take Life Drinker here, and this is an important one. You want on pretty much all your champions, except for Skullcrusher, Heart of Glory. Because we're blocking damage, we're going to have 100% HP the whole time. So might as well take Heart of Glory. I do have Life Drinker on everybody as well, so that we can continue to heal up and we can help guide that stun. Now on the support tree side, went the accuracy route, came down here to Cycle of Magic so we can get more of those poisons going up, the big poison ability, Lore of Steel, and then Master Hexer and Sniper to give us an added chance to land them and extend them if possible. One thing we want to avoid that was on this champion before is Arcane Celerity. Every time a poison falls up, he's going to get a turn meter boost that will throw the entire composition off. As always, turn meter boost on any of your champions will throw off the entire team. So make sure that you avoid that. The last champion that we're going to bring in is Rhazin. Rhazin, of course, is amazing. He will benefit the more defense you stack on him, so he's not going to hit super hard for us in here. We also don't have an increase at defense. I'm sorry, the more defense you build on him, excuse me. The more defense you build on him, the more damage he's going to do. We do not have an increased defense buff, so obviously he's not going to be a super hard hitter, but he's going to give us 2 important debuffs, decreased defense, and weaken. That is stuff you definitely want to bring into your team. Now, as far as masteries go, on the offensive tree, you can see we come all the way down here to Giant Slayer. That is crucial. Definitely want to have that for Rhazin. He's got a triple hit on his A1. And then support tree, very similar. Coming down here to Master Hexer, hopefully extend that decreased defense and weaken. We don't need Sniper. It does have a 100% chance to land. So that's the builds right there. You can see the stats that we have on Rhazin. 175 speed. He's got pretty solid defense and HP. That's all fine. 100% crit rate as usual, and the accuracy is good. Now, ideally, if I'm really trying to maximize this, I would get Rhazin to go just ever so slightly faster than Kayle. That way, he would put his decreased defense up before Kayle goes, allowing Kayle to get the benefit of that decreased defense and weaken on their attack. But it's not crucial to getting this working, and so I can glyph a little bit more speed. He is right at the bottom level at 175, and Kayle's just above him at 176. So if I can glyph 2 speed on Rhazin, that would be the ideal. I'm not generally a fan of the Tower Skullcrusher composition because it's so hard to get the stun to go right. And part of the reason why this version is going to work really well is we have champions with very, not super great gear. So the HP levels are lower, the defense levels are lower. It's a lot easier to actually manipulate stuff at this level, strangely enough. When you have those gear levels super high, it becomes a little bit harder to actually guide things for yourself. Because one of the important things is making sure Skullcrusher gets as low on HP as fast as possible. We're going against a blue affinity clan boss. That means they're going to try to avoid red affinity champions. They're going to try to avoid Skullcrusher here. That means the preferred targets are going to be Kayle, who you'll notice we have higher in the turn order. That's really key to making sure that Kayle takes the stun instead of Tower. And Kayle probably will take at least 1 or 2 stuns in this. So that turn order part of it is important. Having another blue affinity champion in here so that Tower doesn't take the stun is also really nice and helpful. This isn't easy. If you're trying to do this and you're screwing it up, it's not working for you, don't be too upset by that. This is hard to do. Guiding the stun is as much art as it is science these days, so it's a little bit difficult. Doompriest is going to give us heals, so everybody is going to heal over time, and we just need Skullcrusher to take the stun. So how we get Skullcrusher to take the stun is a little bit tricky. We do need a manual a little bit longer than usual. Now, normally when you do this, the only delays we have to do is we have to wait to use Skullcrusher's counterattack and unkillable ability till right before the stun, and then Tower basically just would A1 here and then be able to use his block damage ability on the next turn. We click auto, we're good to go. Skullcrusher's counterattack buff will help guide the stun to him in most scenarios. But when we're working with Affinity, because the clan boss has a strong preference for either hitting neutral or weak affinity over anybody that's strong affinity, or hitting somebody that's weak affinity over anybody that's neutral affinity, it can be really difficult to help guide the stun. I'm actually glad we have a blue clan boss today to help show how this works. So now if we were going against red affinity, that might prove its own difficulties, and maybe we have to manual a little bit longer to make sure this works, but this can work. And I'm going to show you how right here. So first off, we're going to go ahead, just manualing through. The big thing is with Skullcrusher, we're going to use his counterattack ability right from the get-go. Everybody else, I'm just using their damage abilities, and I'm making sure not to use Tower's block damage skill. That's really crucial. So there we go. Decreased defense weaken. We got the poisons out. Now I'm going to use this counterattack ability right from the get-go. This is going to help retake all that damage that everybody else is taking, and you can see Skullcrusher is already one of the lower champions HP-wise on this team. That's by design. We want him to be at the bottom as long as possible. Now, I do have to manual for a couple cycles. We need to make sure that we don't use Tower's block damage skill. That's really key. It is very helpful that both Rhazin and Kayle are in lifesteal gear. It helps to ensure that they are healing up, and so that they are going to be full HP for this fight. That helps to guide things as well. And you can see that ally protection is still working, and now Skullcrusher is considerably lower in HP. he's not low enough where the clan boss is still going to want to stun him because of affinity. So we can't, you know, hit auto just yet. But that's the point we're waiting on. Basically, we're waiting for him to be low enough to take the stun, and that's the point where we're going to be able to start hitting auto after that. So there goes the stun. Goes to Kale, right? Neutral affinity champion. The clan boss likes to avoid the strong affinity champions. That's all par for the course. We're not using the block damage skill yet. We're going to continue manualing here and basically just let us get through this. Now, this is the round. So we're putting up that ally protection again. We're going to take all that damage, and again, we're not putting up block damage, so we're not, you know, mitigating that. You can see now we're really low. Now we're under 50% HP. That's really where we want to get to, and that's going to be key. Now the stun should be going to Skullcrusher, especially after this next hit, and that's going to be really key. So then we're just going to have to readjust to make sure that he's going to be unkillable at this point going forward. So we have to have enough. There's a dance here with HP and defense too, right? We need to make sure Skullcrusher has enough HP that he doesn't die from that hit right there. But we also need to make sure that it's not too much so that that's not bringing him low enough to actually stay under 50%. And so there's that little balance there. On the same token, everybody else has to survive too. Now with the ally protection on everybody else, it shouldn't be too hard for them to survive. You can build them pretty attack heavy and it won't be an issue. Kale here has very low defense. It's not going to be an issue because of that ally attack. The big key is really Skullcrusher. Now, Skullcrusher did take the stun. You saw that. He had under 50% HP, and so he took the stun. That's what we want. That's the goal right here. So now we're going to get ourselves into the unkillable spot. So tower we need, he's going to take a double turn there, so we're just going to use the A1 first. Everybody's kind of going. Boom, boom, boom. Rhazin gets decreased defense and weaken. And now we don't want to use a counterattack yet. Now we're going to save it so that we can stay unkillable for the stun. That's going to be crucial. Here goes the block damage. Excellent. And we just have to finish cycling through this. Or finish going through, manualing through this cycle, I should say. And we'll be in good shape. Everybody else is healing up during this time because we're not taking damage because of the block damage buff. Staying full health isn't much of an issue. If you do have an issue with that, you can always just stick an immortal set on somebody. That's going to help with that a lot. But Doompriest is pretty clutch for this stuff. Alright, so now we are right before the stun here. There goes tower. Everybody's taking their attacks. Here goes Rhazin. Boom, boom, boom. And Skullcrusher right here, we're going to put up the counterattack and the unkillable. He takes the stun, and at this point, I can click auto, and we are fully in sync. So you do have to manual about 9 turns, right? Turn count 9. It's about the time you can click auto with it. But that's only for these difficult affinities. The rest of the time, we're good to go. Now, one of the things you'll notice, Skullcrusher is pretty close to 50% HP. I really like him to be below that. So if you're struggling with this, you just have to adjust those HP levels. Maybe have to manual for 1 extra cycle, which isn't obviously our preferred, but to make sure that we have an unkillable team that works for, you know, all the difficulties is really great. And so we're going to see here, if he takes a stun, we're in good shape. He does take the stun. Getting that counterattack up helps guide the stun to him. Now, when you're going against red affinity, this can be a little bit more difficult. The clan boss really likes to hit people that are weak affinity, and so generally the difference that you need in that HP is usually a little bit bigger. But it should still be workable if you can kind of follow this same method, and that's really the key to making that work. It's not my favorite comp in the world because of this, because it is a little bit difficult to guide that stun, but it's possible, very doable, and this is how we do it. So yeah, let's go ahead. We'll just jump to the end here, and you guys can see the damage that we do. 2-key Brutal to 2-key Nightmare. Done. Now, obviously, you know, Affinity is going to have an impact on the damage we do, and I think this could, in Ultra Nightmare, do close to a 3-key. It's probably still a 4-key on average, but it'll be close. You know, but if we can improve the champions, improve the damage, I think it could easily move up. Now, there's a lot of little nuances with this team, so let me go over that really quick for you. The Tower Skullcrusher composition has been used for a long time. It is a very well-used, well-versed composition. And so there's a lot of ways you can go about doing this. Many people have come up with a variety of ways to either deal with the stun, to block the debuffs, as well as maximize your damage. Using a Doompriest is obviously not great damage-wise. He doesn't do a lot of damage on his own. He does bring a nice attack up buff, but that's kind of all he does. So you can use some alternatives. You can definitely try and block the debuffs. If you bring in a champion at 173 speed who places a block debuff skill, you can block the stun from actually happening. It won't mitigate the damage, but it'll mitigate the debuff, and that allows Skullcrusher to stay in tune. Because if Skullcrusher takes the stun, everything gets thrown out of whack. It delays his skills by 1 turn, which means he won't have Unkillable up at the right time. Another way you can go about doing that is by bringing in a different cleanser, like, say, a Bad Alcazar instead of a Doompriest, and having him cleanse the stun. That can work too. Where it gets tricky is when you're dealing with Spirit Affinity, because obviously Spirit Affinity puts a slow debuff on your team, and you need to deal with that, either by blocking it before it happens or by cleansing it right after. This is why Doompriest is so good for this, because he does both those things. Another champion that would be great, though, if you have them on your team, because they're legendaries, but champions like Blind Seer or even Brogni can make that happen as well. And most of the time, Skullcrusher's counterattack will funnel the stun to him. But if he doesn't, if you're working with a bad affinity matchup, like I said before, red or blue affinity, those can be a little bit more problematic. And so when you're dealing with that, this method of having him use the ally protection for a while to be able to take that stun is gonna be effective, I think. Another alternative, though, if you're not able to make that work, is just bring in a different stun champion. And I have a game on video down below highlighting a few different options that you can do to bring in different stun champions depending on the affinity you're dealing with. But that's not always the best choice. We don't like building up multiple champions if we don't have to. But that is a very viable and well-used way of getting around the Skullcrusher issue when it comes to affinity. So there are a couple ways to go about this. Now, obviously, this is not like the optimal team as far as using Rhazin and Kale. Rhazin without an increased defense buff is not my favorite choice. I'd much prefer to go with a Thane, for example. I'd really love to bring in an ally attack champion like Farrakhan the Fat or Kreela. Those would be fantastic options too. Even getting an Occult Brawler or a Frozen Banshee instead of Kale would definitely be an improvement damage-wise. So there's a lot of easy ways to kind of improve the damage that this team does, but this is a great example of how to make it work. Especially on an early level account, you can see how powerful this can be even if you don't, have a million champions to choose from. As long as you have Tower, as long as you have Skullcrusher, and a Doompriest, you can make this work. It is 3 specific champions, I grant you. But there are some alternatives for each of them. And like I said, I'll go over those in that game on video. If you like today's music, there's that Soundstripe link down below. You can click on that. And as always, subscribe, like the video. Much thanks to Brother Mar and all these other Patreons for supporting me. I really couldn't do this without them. So much appreciation and thanks goes out to them. And that's all we have for today. So till next we meet, I'm the Deadwood Jedi.